Most people enter Glacier National Park through a ticket booth and a paved road. But today we're doing things a little differently. Today I am actually hiking on the southern boundary trail of Glacier National Park, above the wild and scenic middle fork of the Flathead. This path was actually once used by moonshiners and outlaws. So I'm excited to be taking you down this trail, maybe talking a little bit about Glacier's history and walking the footsteps of outlaws and moonshiners. I can't imagine a better way to spend an afternoon. And if you are looking to avoid crowds, even in summertime, you will find solitude, you will find quiet trails. You might not find quietness on this trail because the train tracks run right across the river, but you're not going to see very many people, and you will see some beautiful views of Glacier, a less visited part of Glacier. So as I hike here, I'm gonna stop at pretty viewpoints and talk a little bit about the history of Glacier, just for your listening enjoyment and hopefully a little bit of education. But Glacier was actually the 10th national park founded, and it was founded in 1910 by President Taft. It was actually on May 11th, so we're coming right up to a birthday for Glacier National Park. I'm not too far down the trail, but I wanted to point out these trees here. And these are actually Western red cedar. Kind of the cedar mystery of this part of Glacier National Park. They're actually called a disjunct species, meaning they usually belong in around the Pacific coast, but because of this microclimate we have here on this side of the park, it allows them to really thrive hundreds of miles from the coast. You'll see some beautiful specimens on the Trail of the Cedars, in the Mission Mountains, so it's really special to be able to have these beautiful trees in this part of Montana. Cat track. Don't know what kind, it's not huge. Maybe bobcat? Lynx? I don't know if it'd be big enough to be a mountain lion. Trains are awesome. Highway 2 is right across the way. Highway 2 is the highway that runs between, well, Highway 2 goes forever, but the part of Highway 2 that is most traveled by tourists is between West and East Glacier. I've been following the tracks of some people just in boots and some on snowshoes here, but this was their turnaround point, and it's a nice turnaround point with this beautiful viewpoint I was just talking at, but we're gonna keep going. Unbroken trail from now on out. If you're here in the winter or spring of 2026, I'm filming in January, expect quite a bit of downfall on the trail. I've actually been to this point on the trail a couple of different times to climb the Belton Hills up here, but I've never been beyond this point right here, so I'm excited to be starting on some new territory. Let's go see what the trail holds for us. It's just a nameless little creek, flowing nicely though. See how well my spikes do in the water here. Ah, very good. I have a video coming out. Oops, there we go. I don't know if it's going to be finished before or after this one, but anyway, I will put a link somewhere up on the screen for the video on how these new ghost micro spikes from Cotulla have done for me. Spoiler alert, I really like them, but I'll link my review, my first impressions of it, somewhere up on the screen here. I know you can't see it too well because of the trees, but there's some fun rapids here, and you may or may not know that you can have guided raft trips down the Middle Fork. They are quite popular in summer. I've actually never done one, but I might someday. I'm not a huge fan of being on water, but you know, you got to do it once in your life, maybe. So what we're looking at here are actually tamarack, or sometimes they're called larch, and they come up after fires oftentimes. Larch and lodgepole. These are mainly larch in here, in this little section. And yeah, much of the forest along this trail is actually considered second growth forest. This area was actually heavily impacted by something called the Half Moon Fire in 1929, which burned over 100,000 acres. And yeah, it was really, that was before my time, but it was quite a massive and impactful fire. But thankfully we have these lovely larch, which actually drop their needles in fall, that have come back and reforested this area among other trees. Jeez, can you imagine going down a raft over that? I can't. No, thank you. I know some people could, though. Leave me a comment if you're a rafter. And if this looks like, woohoo, I'd do that in a heartbeat. I'm on a little, pretty quiet part of the trail here, about 4 and maybe 4.25 miles in on my hike, and it's quiet here. I'm a little above the river, and there's not too much road traffic, so I wanted to tell you a little bit more fun facts about Glacier National Park. Low Branch. So as I mentioned, Glacier was founded May 11th, 1910. But did you know that its nickname is the Crown of the Continent? And that's just not a clever marketing scheme. It's because the waters that come from Glacier actually flow into 3 different oceans: the Pacific, the Atlantic via the Gulf of Mexico, and the Arctic via Hudson Bay. And there's actually a peak in Glacier on the more eastern side called Triple Divide Peak. I've actually climbed that peak a couple times, but literally the snow melt from Triple Divide goes into those 3 oceans. Yeah, pretty awesome. And along with that, Glacier is also an international peace park, along with Waterton up in Canada, Waterton National Park. And in 1932, Glacier and Waterton became Glacier Waterton International Peace Park. And that was and is to symbolize the friendship between the United States and Canada, which is wonderful. So I mentioned outlaws and moonshiners at the beginning of the hike. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to come out here was to see if I could find the Doody homestead, and it's about 7 miles up. I'm already over 5 miles, and I'm just not going to make it today. Back to the Doodys. They were quite the couple in Glacier's early history, early times. So Josephine Doody was known as the Moonshine Lady of Glacier. I've got my little cheat sheet here. And she was a former dance hall girl who fled a shooting in Colorado and ended up here in Montana in Glacier making moonshine for the railroad workers. Now, how awesome is that? Rawr. And then her husband, Dan Doody, and there's actually a peak, a very imposing, beautiful peak called Doody Mountain, Doody Peak. I'll bring a photo of it in and its proper title. And Dan Doody was actually one of the first of 6 park rangers hired in 1910 when the park was founded, but he got fired for poaching. Anyway, I thought that was just a little bit of fun glacier history that I actually didn't know until a few days ago, when I just heard about the Doody homestead and then studied up a little bit on Josephine and her husband Dan. So yeah, pretty awesome. I don't know if I'm going to make it to Lincoln Creek. I'm not well past. I'm about 5.25 miles in, so I got 5.2 miles going that way back. Maybe I'll go a little bit further and see what I can see, and then yeah, we'll head back. I waved. I don't know if anyone saw me. I had to bushwhack a little bit to get this kind of unobstructed view of the Middle Fork, but just a few yards. Some nice rapids over there. So I mentioned earlier that the Middle Fork of the Flathead is a wild and scenic river, and what that means is its waters are free flowing. It won't ever be dammed, and it's one of the cleanest river systems in the lower 48. So yay! Beautiful Middle Fork. Okay, I'm on my way back. Gave it up. Didn't make it to Lincoln Creek. That's fine. I did want to point out, and I'm zoomed in, so I'm a little shaky here. This is, we're looking at St. Nick Peak. That's one thing, you're not going to get huge expansive views of the big peaks in Glacier on this trail, at least the section I am on. But that is St. Nick, one of the most beautiful and imposing peaks in the park, and I just wanted to point that out to you, so I'm glad we got to see it today. It's beautiful. And another thing I wanted to mention is Glacier Park's name, Glacier Park. Well, where's all the glaciers? Well, good question. So from what I could find, in 1910, when Glacier was founded, there were approximately 150 glaciers. Now there's approximately 26 glaciers, and for something to be considered an active glacier, it has to be about 25 acres in size. And I believe anything smaller than that is called a remnant. If that's not correct, I'll put the correct term on the screen. So, and needless to say, the remaining glaciers are melting fast. So if you want to see an actual glacier in Glacier National Park, you better get out here before they all melt. You may be wondering why I haven't mentioned too much about the Indigenous people, the Native Americans, whose land this historically was, Glacier National Park, and kind of on purpose, because there's just so much information there. I think that could potentially be its own video. So if you're interested in hearing more about the Indigenous people who used to inhabit these lands and who used Glacier National Park, that would be the Blackfeet on the east side and the Salish and Kootenai on the more western side, definitely let me know, and I'd love to make a video about it. So drop me a comment if you'd be interested in anything like that. Okay, here we are back at that kind of that initial overlook that I was at several hours ago now, but getting on toward evening time and the light is just gorgeous, yay. But I just quickly wanted to talk about this trail in general and who I think it would be good for and kind of the situation with it. So this is the South Boundary Trail. It's basically the southern boundary of Glacier National Park, the section that I was on today. Excuse me, I was just humping uphill there. Okay, catch my breath here. And I think in wintertime, Glacier, you're gonna basically have the place to yourself, which is wonderful. Now in summertime, as we all know, Glacier, especially the more popular trails, it gets very busy. And I think this trail, the South Boundary Trail, would be a wonderful respite from all of the people. Now, is it gonna be a quiet, thoughtful hike You know, you've got the trains, you've got the traffic, you've got the river, and it was actually really awesome. I really enjoyed the hike today. But if you're looking for a really peaceful, quiet hike to get away from the crowds of Glacier, this might not be the one. If you're looking for solitude and need a break from hundreds of people on the trail, say you just hiked up to Grinnell Glacier, Iceberg Lake, and you just need a break from all the people, I would highly recommend this trail. Again, is it going to be quiet and peaceful? Not really. You know, again, the trains, the traffic, and the river. And then I know in summertime, as I mentioned, they have the rafters that come down, so they're going to be whooping and hollering and shrieking and squealing and having all sorts of fun, but it's not going to be quiet. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. But I personally really enjoyed my hike today. I'm not done. I think you could actually come to this point that I'm at right here, and it would be, I don't know how long it is, it would be a very moderate, a very mild, a very family friendly hike to this point with this gorgeous view, which is not Glacier. This would be, I think, the Great Bear Wilderness. So I definitely recommend this trail, but just know what to expect on it. So let's head back down. I don't know, maybe a mile and a half from the trailhead. I'll put on the screen here how far it is round trip to this point right here on this lovely trail. But let's head that way. And I also wanted to mention, on this particular trail, you're not going to have huge expansive views of the mountains. But another thing I wanted to mention is, if you are considering coming to Glacier in winter, I did create a video like the do's and don'ts of, or the pros and cons of visiting Glacier in winter. So I'll link that somewhere up on the screen. Okay, we're back where we started. Beautiful Belton Bridge. I would have started with this. I was actually right down here this morning trying to film, but Mom and Dad and the kids and the dog showed up, and yeah, I don't think they wanted to be in the video. So I should say that we are actually standing on the original entrance to Glacier National Park, meaning back in the day, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there wasn't even a bridge. People, that was even before it was a national park, but people had to be taken across in a boat to get over to this side of the river. And well, the Belton Bridge was built in 1920. Only the arch underneath this modern walkway is the only thing remaining after a catastrophic flood in 1964. I'll bring in a photo or some footage that I shot this morning so you can actually see what the arch looks like. All right, I think it's time to wrap up this video. I really enjoyed exploring this trail with you, learning about Glacier National Park along with you. And yeah, if you again enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing to my channel and liking it, and I will see you in the next one.